In the early 1950s, it was unheard of for a group of women to initiate legal reforms, especially on a subject like women's rights.
She was actually being questioned by the women whether there was a need for us to do more for women in Singapore. To which she replied, "Do not be fooled by what you see." And with that, she remained very much resolute in her push for equal status of women.
We were always proud of our grandma, someone who wasn't scared to rock the boat, not scared to be different and stand up for what she believed in, and to change things that she didn't feel were right.
Checha Davies was born in 1898 in the Malabar region of Kerala, India.
Now, Checha was highly educated. She had a master's degree. If you have a master's degree before the war, that's somebody. In fact, I believe that she might have been the first woman to have graduated from Kerala with a master's degree.
With her master's in economics and English history, Checha followed her father's footsteps and became an educator.
My grandmother really admired her father, she called him a saintly man, a man of service and one who really wanted to make a difference with people around him.
Checha joined the Young Women's Christian Association, known as the YWCA, in 1916 in India.
She was a very keen Christian, but very non-traditional, because she really encouraged people to live by their beliefs rather than just go to church every day. You know, it was about living the Christian life, of being able to make a difference in the betterment of the world.
Checha was most interested in helping the less privileged. And most of the underprivileged at that time happened to be women. The YWCA, they championed things like adult education for girls, which were non-existent during that time, classes for children, and hostels for young women who come to a big city to find work.
In 1925, Grandma moved from Kerala to Singapore as a young bride after getting married because Grandpa, Edward, had a teaching post in Singapore.
Despite having to adapt to her new surroundings, Checha's desire to help the underprivileged took precedence, and she remained active in church work and various voluntary sectors such as the Singapore extension of the YWCA.
She would always initiate things like earthquake relief, for instance, or the giving of food to needy families. She was also giving a lot of money to charity.
Grandma lived a very simple life. She didn't believe in spending a lot on her own personal things, but she was generous without a second thought. If someone needed something, she would be happy to help them, and many people would go to her and ask for money.
Checha's kindness was, however, sometimes taken advantage of.
Some people would come up to her with some sad stories and, try to get some money out of her. And she would find a way to help them. And sometimes it was abused. And so friends would say, "Checha, some people are taking advantage of you. You shouldn't be so generous with your money." But Grandma would say, "I can't stop being generous because of some people who take advantage of me. Because what would happen to those who genuinely need my help? And I would like to help them. That's what is most important."
In the late 1960s, as the president of the YWCA, she spearheaded the fundraising for the YWCA 6-story Fort Canning hostel, which at that time was the largest hostel for female workers.
The YWCA Fort Canning hostel was very significant when it was built because at that time, lodgings were very unsafe for young women coming from rural areas to a big city to find work. So the YWCA provided much needed safe space for young women. The hostel also provided vocational training skills which were useful for them to find jobs later on in their lives.
My grandmother always had fun and unique ways to raise funds. And her idea to raise funds for the hostel extension was she decided to give a gold sovereign for each pound of weight that she had. And so, she excitedly weighed herself and was happy to donate.
This in turn inspired other women to follow suit and to donate their weight in money as well. When the YWCA was still short on funds to complete the hostel building, Checha even sold her house that she inherited in Johor to help fund the lift for the hostel.
We didn't get shocked. That was Grandma. If she believed in something, she would do it.
Beyond starting fundraisers and making donations, Checha even co-founded various social organizations for women like the Inner Wheel Club and the Lotus Club.
The Lotus Club was the first Indian women's association, and she got women a place to come to talk about social issues, to do some charitable work, to learn some useful skills, and also had a series of educational talks for Indian women.
The idea was to create an organization where Indian women of all creed, caste, culture, and education could meet regularly, as the existing Indian association at that time mainly catered to men.
So that was good because it gave women some friendship outside the home, because women in those days just kept to their homes and were just looking after their children.
In 1950, after the Japanese occupation, the Lotus Club merged with another Indian ladies' club then, the Ladies' Union, to form the Kamala Club, which still exists to this day. The success of the Lotus Club was merely a glimpse of the achievements that Checha would go on to accomplish.
Being leader of the Inner Wheel, she represented Singapore at a very historic conference called the Pan-Asian Conference, held in Delhi, 1947. This Pan-Asian Conference discussed many things, not just issues of independence, not just issues of economics or finance, but also about the status of women. She also met many Asian leaders there, like Shireen Foster, who was a prominent advocate of women's rights.
This meeting with Shireen would eventually pave the way for something greater. In 1951, Checha was approached by Shireen to form the committee of the Singapore Council of Women, SCW, alongside several other women.
There were already many women's organizations, many of them. But this one, Singapore Council of Women, was different. It was not just a social help or mutual help group like many of the women's associations at that time. It was an advocacy group for women's rights. It's going to unite all the different women's organizations into a united front, because unity is strength. And it is going to fight to push for legislative changes. The first of the legislative changes will be one man, one wife.
At that point in time, it was a society where men could have many wives, and they could also divorce their wives very easily. There was actually no legal obligation for them to care for the wife and the children after divorce. So that actually led to a lot of social issues. You have a lot of women who were not able to support themselves without the security and the provisions from the husbands, which is why the SCW wanted to push for the end of polygamous marriages.
The SCW was the city's first female civil rights group that took bold steps to champion legal reforms that addressed gender disparity.
In the early 1950s, it was unheard of for a group of women to initiate legal reforms, especially on a subject like women's rights. The media mocked these women. They had a fun time with them because they found their agenda rather far-fetched, rather idealistic.
Checha had the momentous task of recruiting more women in Singapore to the women's rights cause, which ironically proved challenging.
Recruitment was difficult because at that time, in the 1950s, there was a stigma to the women's cause, and many women were afraid to sign. Many of them felt they had to ask their husbands' permission.
Checha, in fact, was even being questioned by the women in the society at that point, whether there was a need for an organization like SCW, to which she replied, do not be fooled by what you see, and that there is actually no equal status for women at all. And with that, she remained very much resolute in her push for equal status of women.
By 1955, SCW's membership peaked at 2,000 members, making it the largest group of its kind for the next 50 years.
Where did the 2,000 women members come from? Thanks to Checha. Checha had a very wide connection. She had been working for a few decades before on the Lotus Club, on the International Women's Club, the Interview, the YWCA, and she was able to get them and say, come and join us. Let's get together. Let's forget our differences. Let's fight for equality. Checha and the Singapore Council of Women had to plan their movements with precision to bring forward their agenda. And they wrote letters to the press, they gave talks, they went out and distributed flyers and so forth. They even drafted, with Checha's help, because she had a master's degree, with Checha's help, a bill for the Legislative Council demanding equal rights, equal status for women, demanding one man, one wife, the abolition of polygamy. And this was sent to the Legislative Council in 1954. Unfortunately, it failed to be moved.
This setback, however, did not faze Checha and the SCW.
These women summoned their courage and their fortitude and pressed on.
Between 1955 and 1959, Checha and the SCW lobbied various political parties in Singapore to address women's injustices. The People's Action Party, influenced by its Women's League led by Chan Choi Siong, took a strong stand on women's rights and adopted the SCW's One Man, One Wife slogan for their campaign. In the 1959 general elections, the PAP's victory with 43 out of 51 seats led to their control of the Legislative Assembly. And in 1961, the Women's Charter Bill was finally passed, marking the culmination of Checha and the SCW's decade-long fight for women's rights.
For women, it was definitely a landmark bill, and it changed Singapore society forever. The Women's Charter meant that women were now protected by marriage, that their husband cannot just divorce them at will, their husband cannot just take a second wife, and the husband has to pay them some alimony if they actually want to get a divorce. It also recognizes the rights of women to contribute to the economic fiber of society and not just the family. So this set the foundation for the future prosperity and progress of Singapore as a modern nation. Beyond the Women's Charter, Checha and the SCW have left behind an unforgettable legacy, and they blaze an entirely new path for future organizations in championing gender equality and women's rights, like the SCWO, Singapore Council of Women's Organization, today.
SCW's key focus is on changing mindsets, because that is crucial to eliminating and breaking down the gender stereotypes that still exist today. And we do this through the various programs that we have, like outreach programs, educational programs, that bring stories of women like Checha to the community, including our younger generation, both boys and girls. The ultimate aim is really to have a society where both men and women play equal roles at all levels, whether it's at home, at work, or in the community.
Checha was awarded the Bintang Bakti Masyarakat, or Public Service Star, in the 1970 National Day Honours, and in 2014, she was inducted into the Singapore Women's Hall of Fame.
Grandma was absolutely a role model to us. And I'd like to think that in many ways, me, my mother, and each of my sisters have followed in her footsteps.
Sushil and her sisters are all involved in various forms of social action and community building, focusing on children, youth, women's empowerment, and equality.
The last time I saw Grandma was at her 80th birthday celebration in 1978. I remember I was in Fiji by then, and my husband and I came from Fiji for this gathering. We sang, we celebrated, we had so much fun. Lots of people that knew her were at this event, and it was a wonderful occasion. And in 1979, my grandmother passed away.
Checha was a leader. She had the vision and the audacity and the courage to dream of a better world and a better future for all Singaporeans.
I hope for my grandma to be remembered as a trailblazer, as someone who wasn't scared to rock the boat, to do what she can for the betterment of those around her.
I'm truly thankful for what women like Checha did for Singapore. She fought tirelessly for the rights of women, and she never gave up. If not for women like Checha, Singapore might not be what it is today.